The command echoed through Terminal 5 like a gunshot. Kill. It wasn't a warning. It was an execution order. 12 German Shepherds, the FBI's elite Titan unit, launched across the polished terrazzo floor. These weren't family pets. These were biological weapons. 80 pounds of muscle and teeth, bred to shatter bone and strip flesh. The crowd screamed. Mothers pulled their children behind suitcases. The air smelled of expensive cologne and cold sweat. In the center of the atrium, one man stood completely still. Salvatore, the architect, Rossi. He didn't run. He didn't reach for a weapon. He just stood there in a charcoal pinstripe suit that cost more than most people's cars, checking his vintage Rolex. He looked bored. Behind him, Agent Elias Vance grinned. His hand hovered over his holster, fingers twitching. Vance had chased Rossi for 20 years. He had failed every single time. But today was different. Today he had the dogs. He wanted Rossi on the ground. He wanted him bleeding. He wanted the world to see the king of Chicago broken. Take him down. Vance screamed again, his voice cracking with desperation. The lead dog, a massive black sable beast named Kaiser, closed the distance. Kaiser was the alpha. He hit a top speed of 30 miles per hour, his jaws snapping open, aimed directly at Rossi's throat. Rossi looked up. He didn't flinch. He locked eyes with the charging beast and whispered one single word. Basta. Enough. The outcome defied physics. Kaiser skidded to a halt. His claws screeched against the tile, sparking friction burns on the floor. He stopped 3 inches from Rossi's Italian leather shoes. The snarl vanished. The ears went back flat against his skull. The killer instinct evaporated. Kaiser didn't bite. He lowered his massive head and let out a sound that silenced the entire terminal. He whimpered. It was the sound of a puppy greeting its master. Rossi reached out a hand, the hand of a man accused of 3 dozen murders, and gently scratched the terrifying animal behind the ears. Hello, old friend, Rossi said softly. The other 11 dogs skidded into position. They didn't surround Rossi to trap him. They turned around. They sat down, chests puffed out, facing outward. They formed a living wall between the Mafia Don and the police. Stop right there. Look at that image in your mind. The hunters protecting the prey. Comment loyalty below if you believe dogs are the best judge of character. I want to see how many dog lovers are watching right now. Agent Vance's grin fell off his face. He stepped forward, confused. What is this? Engage. I said engage. He reached for his radio, panic setting in. But he didn't realize yet that he had already lost. Because to understand why 12 federal assets just committed treason for a mob boss, you have to go back to a freezing night in 2012. You have to go back to the fire. To understand the treason you just witnessed, we have to rewind the clock. 3 hours earlier, Salvatore Rossi sat in the back of a black Lincoln Town car, parked 2 miles from O'Hare. He wasn't checking stock prices. He was staring at a piece of paper from Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Stage for pancreatic adenocarcinoma. The doctors gave him 90 days. Maybe less. Rossi wasn't at the airport to escape extradition. He wasn't running to a non-extradition country to sip mojitos. He was going home to die. He wanted to see the sun set over his grandfather's vineyard in Tuscany one last time. He had made his peace with God, but he hadn't made peace with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. In a surveillance van 3 blocks away, Agent Elias Vance watched the drone feed. Target is mobile, a technician said, pointing to the screen. Sir, we intercepted his medical records this morning. You should see this. He's terminal. He's not a flight risk. He's a hospice patient. Vance didn't look at the medical file. He threw in the trash. I don't care if he has 20 minutes left, Vance muttered, adjusting his earpiece. I want him in cuffs. I want the 6 p.m. news to show me walking him out. Vance didn't want justice. He wanted a trophy. He picked up his radio. Shut it down. Close Terminal 5. Divert all incoming flights. I want a localized blackout on the security feeds. Sir, there are 3,000 civilians in there, the technician argued. I said shut it down. Vance slammed his fist on the console. Unleash the Titan unit. If he resists, let them eat. Have you ever been kicked when you were already down? Vance wasn't looking for public safety. He was looking for a promotion at the expense of a dying man. Tell me in the comments. Is Vance doing his job, or is he crossing a line? Back in the present, the silence in the terminal was heavy. Vance stared at the dogs. They weren't moving. His plan for a violent spectacle was failing in real time. Why are they stopping? Vance screamed, spit flying from his lips. Engage. I gave a direct order. The handlers yanked on the heavy leather leashes. They shouted command words in German. Fast. Packin'. Nothing. The dogs remained statues. They ignored the handlers they had lived with for 5 years. They only had eyes for the man in the pinstripe suit. Kaiser moved. The massive dog stood up and walked slowly toward Rossi. Vance drew his service weapon, aiming the barrel not at the mobster, but at the dog's chest. Back away, Vance warned, his finger tightening on the trigger. I will put you down. Rossi looked up at Vance's gun. He didn't blink. He reached out and placed his hand on Kaiser's chest, right over the dog's heart. You can't shoot him, Elias, Rossi said, his voice raspy but steady. He cost $50,000. The paperwork alone would end your career. Vance's face turned purple. He keyed his radio. Override. Hit the failsafe. Now, this was the backup plan. Every dog in the Titan unit wore a tactical collar equipped with a high-voltage override. It was designed to incapacitate the animal instantly if they turned on a handler. The handlers pressed the red buttons on their remotes. Zap. The sound of electricity arcing snapped through the air. Kaiser's body convulsed. His muscles locked up. The pain was designed to drop a grown man to his knees. But Kaiser didn't drop. He shook his massive fur, growled low in his throat, and took a step closer to Vance. The other 11 dogs did the same. They absorbed the voltage. They ignored the pain. They looked at their handlers with pure predatory warning. The failsafe had failed. Vance stared at the remote in his hand, terrified. That's impossible. These collars are military grade. Rossi slowly rose to his feet. He dusted off the knees of his suit. He looked taller now, despite the cancer eating him from the inside. You don't get it, do you? Rossi whispered, looking Vance in the eye. You train them to fear pain. You train them to follow orders. Rossi whistled, 2 sharp notes. The dogs instantly snapped to attention, sitting in a perfect semicircle around him. I raised them to follow a king. Vance took a step back. The power dynamic had shifted. He wasn't a hunter anymore. But how? How did a mob boss rewrite the instincts of 12 federal canines? To understand that, we have to leave the airport. We have to go back 12 years. To a night when the city froze and a kennel burned. Chicago, January 12, 2012, 2 a.m. The temperature was 20 degrees below zero. The wind off Lake Michigan felt like razor blades. On the south side of the city, the Titan breeding facility, a secret police kennel, was quiet. The heating system, old and neglected, was working overtime. A spark in the fuse box changed everything. Within minutes, the old timber frame was engulfed. The fire alarm screamed into the night. The 2 officers on night watch panicked. They saw the wall of orange flame rolling down the hallway. They didn't grab the keys. They didn't unlock the cages. They ran. They burst out the back door, coughing, leaving 30 trapped dogs screaming behind them. But someone else was watching. Salvatore Rossi was driving home from a late-night negotiation. He saw the glow on the horizon. He saw the smoke choking the stars. He told his driver to stop. Rossi stepped out of his warm car. He saw the officers shivering by their squad car, radioing for help that was 10 minutes away. The dogs. Rossi shouted over the roar of the fire. Did you get the dogs? The officers looked down. Shame painted their faces. It's too hot, sir. We can't go back in. Rossi didn't check his watch. He didn't wait for permission. He took off his $5,000 cashmere coat, dipped it in a puddle of slush, wrapped it around his head, and ran straight into the fire. Inside, the heat was physical. It slammed against him like a hammer. The smoke blinded him. He moved by sound. He heard the high-pitched yelps of the trapped animals. Rossi kicked down the first door. He grabbed a collar. A terrified puppy bolted for the exit. He moved to the next. The heat was melting the soles of his shoes. His hands blistered as he touched the hot metal of the latches. One by one, he threw the cages open. The roof groaned. A beam crashed down, blocking the exit. Rossi was trapped in the rear nursery. In the corner, huddled under a metal bench, was a pregnant female German shepherd. Her fur was singed. She had given up. This was Bella, Kaiser's grandmother. Rossi crawled toward her. The air was gone. He was breathing pure poison. He scooped the heavy dog into his arms. She didn't bite him. She buried her nose in his neck. He looked at the window. It was barred. There was no way out. Rossi fell to his knees. He shielded the dog's body with his own, curling around her to protect the unborn litter from the falling embers. He whispered to her in Italian, "Va tutto bene, Bella. Va tutto bene. It's okay, beautiful. It's okay. We judge people by their worst moments. But character is revealed when the fire is hot and nobody is watching." Hit the like button if you think a bad man who saves a dog is better than a good cop who runs away. The fire department arrived 3 minutes later. They found him in the corner. They thought Rossi was dead, but as they pulled him out, he coughed. His hands were burned so badly he couldn't hold a pen for 6 months. But he refused to let go of the dog until he knew she was safe in the ambulance. That night, Bella didn't see a criminal. She imprinted on his scent, the scent of smoke, peppermint, and safety. She passed that memory down to her puppies, and they passed it to theirs. A genetic debt was owed, and today, 12 years later, the debt was being paid. Rossi survived the fire, but he didn't stop there. While recovering in the burn unit, he made a phone call. He bought the land where the kennel stood using a shell company called Fidelis Logistics. He rebuilt the facility. He paid for the state-of-the-art ventilation. He paid for the high-protein kibble. He even paid for the Titan training equipment, the bite sleeves, the obstacle courses, and yes, the Kevlar vest the dogs were wearing right now in the airport. Agent Vance had spent years bragging about the Titan unit's success rate. He never knew that every dollar funding it came from the very man he was trying to put in prison. Rossi became the Shadow Alpha. For a decade, he visited the kennel at night. He bribed the new night watchman, an old veteran named Miller. Rossi would sit in the runs for hours. He didn't train them to attack. He played with them. He hand-fed the runts of the litter. He let them gnaw on his expensive leather shoes. He knew Kaiser was ticklish behind the left ear. He knew Roxy, the small female on the flank, was afraid of thunder, so he would hum to her during storms. He wasn't their master. He was their pack leader. Remember the peppermint mince Rossi was eating in the car in Chapter 2? That wasn't for his cancer nausea. That was the scent marker. When he walked into Terminal 5, the dogs didn't smell a fugitive. They cut through the cologne, the jet fuel, and the sweat. They smelled the peppermint. They smelled the man who whispered to them in the dark. The FBI saw a target. The dog saw their father. And in the wild, you don't attack your father. You die for him. Back in the terminal, reality crashed in. The silence broke. The crowd of travelers, initially terrified, were now holding up their phones. The scene was streaming live on Instagram, TikTok, and X. Hashtag the dogfather was already trending. Vance saw the phones. He realized he was losing the narrative. He needed to end this before the 6 p.m. news cycle turned Rossi into a folk hero. Clear the mezzanine. Vance barked into his radio. "I want the SWAT sniper team in position." Now, high above the atrium, black-clad figures moved into position on the balcony. Heavy boots thudded on metal walkways. The distinct clack-clack of bolt-action rifles loading echoed off the glass walls. Rossi heard it. He knew that sound. He looked at Vance. "Snipers, Elias? In an airport? You really have lost your mind. You leave me no choice," Vance replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "If the dogs won't touch you, a .308 round will. Step away from the animals, Rossi. This is your last warning." Rossi looked at the laser sights dancing on the floor. Red dots searching for a target. He looked at Kaiser. The dog was vibrating with tension. Rossi had a choice. He could surrender and die in a prison hospital, or he could force Vance's hand. He adjusted his cufflinks. He straightened his tie. "I'm not stepping away," Rossi said. "And neither are they. Vance is escalating this to lethal force in a public place. Do you think he's bluffing? Or is he too deep in his own ego to stop? Let me know your prediction." The red laser dots settled on Rossi's chest. One on his heart, one on his forehead. Vance raised his hand to give the signal. "On my mark." But the dog saw the red dots too. In their training, a laser pointer usually meant a target. But they also knew that this man was the pack, and the pack was under threat. Without a command from Rossi, the formation changed. Kaiser barked once, sharp and guttural. Immediately, the 12 dogs broke their semicircle. They tightened the circle around Rossi, pressing their bodies against his legs. They didn't just sit. They stood up on their hind legs, paws resting on his shoulders and waist, creating a literal wall of fur. The outer ring of dogs turned. Kaiser stood directly in front of Rossi, blocking the sniper's line of sight to Rossi's heart. Roxy jumped up on a bench, blocking the headshot angle. They formed a phalanx, a Roman military formation used to protect the commander. The snipers froze. "Sir," the lead sniper radioed, his voice shaky. "I don't have the shot. The hostiles, the K9s, they're shielding the target. I can't shoot without hitting a dog." Vance lowered his hand. He stared in disbelief. "They're using themselves as body armor." A rookie cop whispered nearby. Rossi stood safely inside the cocoon of living warmth. He couldn't feel the cold air of the terminal anymore. He could only feel the rapid heartbeats of 12 creatures willing to catch a bullet for him. We talk about loyalty a lot on this channel. But look at this mental image. This is pure, instinctual honor. Ask yourself, would your best friend stand in front of a sniper for you? Vance was checkmated. He couldn't order the execution of 12 Federal Service dogs on live TV. It would be suicide. "You can't leave, Rossi." Vance screamed, his voice cracking. "The airport is locked down. The doors are sealed. You are trapped in a glass box." Rossi placed a hand on Kaiser's head. He felt the dog's growl rumble through his palm. "I'm not leaving, Elias," Rossi said softly. "I'm just going for a walk." Vance was losing control. The snipers were useless. The crowd was filming. The narrative was slipping through his fingers like sand. He turned his rage on the only targets he could bully, his own men. "Get in there." Vance screamed at the K9 handlers standing on the perimeter. "Grab your damn dogs. Drag them away if you have to." The handlers exchanged nervous glances. They knew the protocol. You never approach a K9 that has broken formation. It's a death sentence. But one man stepped forward. Officer Miller, the rookie, the handler of Roxy, the small female, shielding Rossi's left flank. Miller walked slowly toward the formation. Vance grinned, thinking his order was finally being obeyed. "That's it, Miller," Vance shouted. "Grab the collar. Haul that mutt out of there." Miller stopped 5 feet from the phalanx. He looked at Roxy. She didn't growl at him. She whined, her tail thumping once on the floor. She was asking for permission. Miller looked at Rossi, the man the FBI called a monster. He looked at Vance, the man supposed to be a hero. Miller reached down. He unclipped the heavy leather leash from his belt. He dropped it on the floor. Clang. "No," Miller said. His voice was quiet, but in the silent terminal, it sounded like a shout. Vance froze. "Excuse me." "I said no," Miller repeated, stepping back to stand with the dogs, not against them. "She knows who the bad guy is, sir. And right now, I think she's right." Vance snapped. He marched over and shoved Miller hard in the chest. "You are relieved of duty. You are done." Vance raised his hand to strike the officer again. That was a mistake. Roxy lunged. She didn't bite Vance, but she barked, a sound like a cannon shot, right at his face. Kaiser stepped forward, baring teeth that could snap a femur. Vance stumbled back, tripping over his own feet. The crowd erupted in laughter. It takes courage to stand up to an enemy, but it takes true bravery to stand up to your boss. Miller just threw away his career to do the right thing. Hit the like button for Officer Miller. Vance scrambled to his feet, red-faced and humiliated. He wasn't just fighting a mob boss anymore. He was fighting a mutiny. "It's over," Vance said, raising his weapon. "Call off the dogs, or my men will crush them against the wall." Rossi felt the weight of the moment. He had brought these animals into a war they couldn't win. He couldn't let them die for him. He took a breath to surrender, to tell them to stand down. But a shadow moved near the doors. It wasn't a dog. It was a man. Officer Miller, the rogue handler from earlier, had followed them. He was standing by the emergency fire axe case on the wall. He looked at Rossi. He looked at the locked doors. Miller grabbed the red handle of the fire axe. He didn't look at Vance. He looked at the glass. "Hey, Vance," Miller shouted. Vance turned. "Miller, don't you dare." Miller didn't hesitate. He swung. The axe hit the glass with the sound of a thunderclap. Crash. The reinforced safety glass spiderwebbed instantly. Officer Miller didn't stop. He swung again. And again. Vance watched in horror as his trap shattered into 1,000 glittering diamonds. "Miller, stop. That is a federal crime." Vance screamed, running down the hallway, his boots slipping on the slick floor. Miller didn't answer. He kicked the remaining shards out of the frame. The freezing cold air of the Chicago winter rushed into the hallway, carrying the smell of jet fuel and exhaust. Miller looked at Rossi. He didn't salute. He just nodded. "Go," Miller said. Rossi didn't waste the moment. He stepped through the broken frame. The dogs flowed around him like water. Kaiser took the lead, pushing through the debris, his paws crunching on the glass. The other 11 followed, their bodies pressing against Rossi to keep him upright against the biting wind. Vance reached the end of the hall just as the last dog tail disappeared into the cold. "No!" Vance howled. He shoved Miller aside. Miller stumbled, but didn't fight back. He had made his choice. He had thrown away his badge to save his soul. Vance scrambled through the broken window. He was alone. His tactical team was still stuck behind the riot shields in the narrow corridor. Vance burst out onto the sidewalk. The bright winter sun blinded him for a second. He blinked, scanning the chaotic pickup lane. Cars were honking. Travelers were screaming, pointing at the pack of wolves running down the center lane. And there he was, 50 yards away. Salvatore Rossi was moving toward a black sedan that had just screeched to the curb. The rear door flew open. Rossi was slow. He was stumbling. He wasn't going to make it before Vance caught up. Vance raised his service weapon. He didn't need a run. He just needed to aim. "Stop," Vance shouted, "or I drop you right here." Rossi stopped. He turned around. He looked at Vance one last time. He didn't raise his hands. He smiled. The distance was 40 yards. An easy shot for a trained federal agent. Vance had the sight picture lined up perfectly. The front sight post hovered over the center of Rossi's charcoal suit jacket. "Get on the ground," Vance ordered. His finger took up the slack on the trigger. 4 pounds of pressure. That was all it took to end the 20-year chase. But the dogs weren't done. Kaiser saw the gun. He didn't attack Vance. He knew he couldn't close the distance in time. Instead, Kaiser turned his back on the agent. He sat down directly in front of Rossi. Rossi joined him next. The others followed suit. They built the wall again, a living barricade of fur and loyalty blocking the target. Vance's aim wavered. Instead of a criminal's chest, he was aiming at the head of a hero dog. "Move!" Vance screamed, his voice cracking with frustration. "Move, or I shoot the dog. I swear to God I will shoot the dog." Kaiser stared at him. He didn't blink. He just panted, his breath pluming in the freezing air. Vance has a legal order to stop a fugitive, but he has to kill AK-9 to do it. Some say he should take the shot. Others say it's murder. What would you do? Pull the trigger or lower the gun? Vance's hand shook. The world held its breath. The travelers on the sidewalk stopped screaming. The sirens in the distance seemed to fade. It was just a man with a badge against a beast with a code. Vance looked at Kaiser's eyes. He saw something there that he had never seen in a mirror. Honor. Vance exhaled. The tension left his shoulders. He lowered the gun. "Go," Vance whispered. "Just go." Rossi nodded. He patted Kaiser's head. He climbed into the black sedan. The dogs jumped in after him, piling into the spacious rear cabin. The car peeled away, disappearing into the traffic of I-190. Vance stood there, his gun at his side, watching the taillights fade. Bang! A gunshot rang out. The screen goes black. Vance flinched. He looked up. It wasn't his gun. It was a warning shot fired by a perimeter guard on the roof, way too late. The bullet harmlessly hit the asphalt. But the message was clear. The chase was over. The architect had left the building. Tuscany, Italy. 3 months later. The sun was setting over the rolling hills of Chianti. The light was golden, thick, and warm, a sharp contrast to the gray cold of Chicago. In a stone farmhouse overlooking the vines, the windows were open. The smell of ripening grapes and rosemary filled the room. Salvatore Rossi lay in a large wooden bed. He was thin now. The suit was gone, replaced by a simple linen shirt. His breathing was shallow. The 90 days were up, but he wasn't alone. Lying on the Persian rug beside the bed was a massive black sable German shepherd. Kaiser. The dog's chin rested on the mattress, his eyes fixed on the old man's face. He hadn't left the room in 3 days. He refused to eat unless Rossi ate. Rossi reached out a frail hand. Kaiser nudged it, closing his eyes at the touch. "Bravo," Rossi whispered. "Good boy." Rossi took one last breath, looked at the sunset, and closed his eyes. His chest stopped rising. Kaiser waited. He nudged Rossi's hand again. No response. The dog didn't howl. He didn't bark. He simply laid his head back down on Rossi's lifeless hand and let out a long, heavy sigh. He would guard him until the undertaker came. Back in Chicago, Officer Miller emptied his locker. He had been fired, stripped of his pension, and faced charges. He walked out to his beat-up Honda Civic, wondering how he would pay rent. There was a package on the front seat. No return address. Just a note in elegant handwriting. For the tuition. And for the dog food. Inside was a cashier's check for $1 million. And a photo of Roxy running in a vineyard. Crime doesn't pay. They say dogs are just animals. But on that day in Chicago, a criminal showed more honor than the law, and a pack of dogs taught the world the true meaning of loyalty.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.